Ocean Software, one of the biggest publishers of the 80s and 90s, which were based in Manchester, UK. They published the vast majority of movie to game releases, and historically were known to produce some classics as well as some very bad games. Yes, I am talking about you, Highlander. So what was the best C64 games and what was the very worst that Ocean released? I have recorded gameplay of every release between 1982 up until 1992 and have ranked each title by votes given for a number of years by Lemon64 users. By using reviews and scores of magazines such as Zap and Commodore format, this would be a little unfair. Let's be honest, some of these original reviews were very unreliable, so I am letting votes determine which Ocean games between 1982 and 1992 determine which you rank as the best and the worst of each year. I am releasing a new video every day on my channel, just Jamie. To kick this off, I am starting with 1982, 1983 and 1984. Tomorrow's will be 1985 and so on up until I get to 1992. This was Ocean's first ever publication for 1982, at which point were known as Spectrum Games, but was essentially the same company by founders David Ward and John Woods. Android 2 is a shoot-'em-up maze game in which you had to destroy 5 Minitoids. The maze is filled up with other enemies too. The Minitoids are killed by 3 shots to the head. When all Minitoids are destroyed, the player can then progress on to the next stage. Android 2 is presented as a top-down view, and voters of Lemon64 have ranked this early release as a whopping 6.48%. This is the year that the world would be introduced to Ocean, being renamed from Spectrum Games. 1983 seen 2 games come out of Ocean. Rollerball was based on the arcade game Quicks. The aim of the game is to trap the ball by using your space scriber. That is the theory, but as you can see, I have no idea what I was doing. Lemon64 users have voted this as 5.75%. This fun little arcade style game is a platformer. You must guide your character Quasimodo through challenges and rescue Esmeralda from the Castle of Stronghold. Lemon64 users rated this as a 7.21%, and what a fun little game it is too. A clone to some extent of Donkey Kong, the 80s certainly had its fair share of clones, and this was just one of them. Having said that, once we guide Eddie to the top of the Donkey Kong S stage, we then progress into a random puzzle-like game, as at which point I had no idea what I was doing. Lemon users have collectively rated Eskimo Eddie as a 2.72%. Oh dear, you could say that Eddie has been frozen in time with this score. Ha 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 ha. You are probably wondering that the cover of this didn't say Spellbound. The cover art you just saw was for this game, as well as another, which is coming up on this list. This one is titled Jonny and the Jimpys, and this one isn't to be confused with the Mastronic Added Dimension game of the same name from 1984. This was a sequel to Bangers and Mash. The game is a platformer in the same vein as Chucky Egg. It is boring with no music and repetitive moving sound. The Lemon 64 community has voted this with a whopping score of 3%. How generous. As you can see from my gameplay, I honestly had no idea how to control this stunt bike simulator. The aim of this game is to grab the flags by the seams of it. The game screen is fairly plain to look at, and this is likely why Lemner scored this at 4%. I was just talking about Spellbound being a sequel. This is what it was a sequel to. This is why you might be confused with the same cover art as being Jonny and the Jimpys. Both of these were on the same cassette tape. I actually found this one fairly enjoyable, and of course, if a clone to some degree of a certain yellow character. It certainly is an upgrade from Spellbound for sure. Still, Lemners have voted collectively with a 4.2%. Poor Jonny. Before McDonald's came to the UK in the way that we have today, we had Wimpy, so why not design a kids game based on fast food? You could eat a juicy cheeseburger from Wimpy's and sit on your ass and play the game at the same time. Let's promote health, shall we, Ocean? Mr. Wimpy is actually a fun, if not repetitive game where you must guide your sprite to one side to another, avoiding moving obstacles. 5.29% is a score given by Lemon64, and I'm thinking that this got a low score as parents wouldn't encourage junk food to their children, so we possibly have some bitter people out there who missed out on this one originally. In 1984, if you fancied trying some juggling, Chinese style, your mum probably grounded you for smashing her plates. If you tried this, that is. This is where Chinese Juggler grabbed kids' attention back then. I recently juggled some Disney plates myself to get to grips with this one. I smashed a few in the process and thought this game could save my fiance's plates. But it didn't. As you can see, this obscure puzzler had me baffled, and maybe some lemoners too. You scored this as a 5.83%. I enjoyed my time playing Gilligan's Gold, and a rating of 6.0% isn't bad compared with the other entries from 1984. Roger Frames noted on Lemon that this had some bad collision detection, but to be honest I wouldn't know. As fun as this game seemed, I was baffled as to what to actually do with this one. Another angry user from Lemon claimed that this was a disappointment and was a Bagman clone. If you were a sports fan in 1984 and you had a micro, daily Thompson games were the thing to have. These were notorious for being responsible of destroying many fire buttons on joysticks. As you can see from the footage, I could not even get my runner running, and so I saved myself a controller in the process. 6.13% is what the Lemon community collectively gave Decathlon, and of course there are other daily Thompson games coming in this series. Arcade conversions wasn't anything out of the ordinary in the 80s for microcomputers, and Cavelon was one of them. The opening screen made me feel that this game was programmed in BASIC, and it surprised me. A fairly enjoyable game where some Lemon users felt that it was okay as a time waster. Lemoners rate this collectively as a 6.82%. And the last game of Ocean from 1984 is this spaghetti western shoot 'em up. At first I wondered what the hell was going on, and then I quickly learned to shoot the bad dudes and save the little community from the bank robbers and other bad situations happening. A 7.56% take this to one of the greatness, like Hunchback's score of 7.21%. Well done, Ocean. We are kicking off 1985 with the worst rated C64 games as voted by Lemon64 users. Our first victim is a knockout. It's based on the TV show of the same name which ran between 1966 and 1988. This game is a multi-event sports game, and as you can see I'm failing at it miserably. One Lemon64 user commented, "This game is very accurate, it's crap," and so was the TV show. I think I'll agree with that comment. It's a Knockout should have been called It's a Cash Grab. You voted this game as 4.04%. A Fistful of Bucks is clearly named after the Clint Eastwood 1964 film A Fistful of Dollars, and it's a multi-scrolling shoot 'em up. When I played this, the enemy's bullets travelled so quickly I died many times. I then ended up outside of the wooden shack confronted by a bandit. It was unclear what to do next, and so I just ended this game feeling frustrated. A Lemner even commented, "When entering a building, oh dear." This pitiful but kinda half decent shooter is ranked with a 4.79% rating. If you were at the age in the 1980s, Transformers was a cartoon you likely would have watched and owned a toy, possibly a duvet and even a lunchbox too. Many C64 games can be confusing, and this is definitely one of them. I began this game with what I thought was Optimus Prime, strong, powerful. That illusion went when I touched the wall and exploded. I then morphed into a car and travelled with lightning speed, but still had no clue what to do. Your rating is 5.68%. Try transforming out of that Optimus Prime. A film game tie-in, and one that hasn't yet been ruined by another Hollywood remake or reboot that nobody asked for. The Neverending Story was a popular film from 1984, and of course Ocean had to build a game on the success of the most expensive film ever produced outside of America at the time. The game, from what I gather, is a text adventure. I found it Gremlins the Adventure, and this was no exception. There is no music in this game, and I spent 10 minutes on this before turning it off. For me, this could have been a never-ending situation. See what I did there? As mentioned in yesterday's video, there was a few Daley Thompson games on C64. This is the second game in the series by Ocean. The game has several different games in one, and as you can see, I felt absolutely miserably at shooting. The controls were strange to adopt, but I am happy I didn't mangle up my controller at the same time by button bashing. Most people on Lemon agreed that this is one solid game, and of course a quintessential title in 1985 for sports fans. 6.3% is the vote from Lemoners. As we know, arcade ports and clones were rife in the 1980s, but we have a fairly different take on Donkey Kong here. The first thing that captured my attention was the speed of the game, and when hit, your sprite whizzes around the screen very quickly. It's a tough game to play, and fast paced for sure, compared to other Donkey Kong games. The theme of Kong Strikes Back is set in an amusement park. Climbing the rails will get you to finish stages, but best of luck with that. As per usual, these 64 games are challenging, and Kong Strikes Back is no exception. 6.32% is a well-earned score. Tornado Low Level, or abbreviated to TLL, is a strange game which I had no clue on knowing what to do in this. My plane seemed to have a mind of its own, as you can see from the footage. I didn't see any tornadoes in the game, so instead I'll wait for the new Twister film coming out. Legend has it, this is a fun arcade game, but as you know, I didn't experience any arcade action in this, as my plane continued to crash throughout. 6.33% is what Lemoners feel for TLL. Up next we have another 80s franchise coming to the C64 with Roland Rat. As a kid I loved Roland Rat and was a fan of the Roland Rat song too. The game looks great, gameplay again was clueless. It seemed that I could squirt my glue but had no idea what I was supposed to be squirting it at. The music was also very impressive in this one. We can see that by 1985 the C64 SID chip was beginning to be programmed in a good way. The Lemon 64 community rates this one as 6.98%. Ranking at 1985's top rated ocean game, we have Frankie, aka Frankie Goes to Hollywood, aka another cash grab, with a game that somebody likely had to one side and slap Frankie Goes to Hollywood on it. I booted up this game and thought I might be greeted with a SID rendition of shooting it in the right direction. I am surprised that the BBC didn't try banning this game too. Anyways, this one is a multi-genre game comprised of action, adventure, mystery and shooting. I failed to shoot anything in the right direction. I failed to even open up a door. A generous 8.27%. Now, that is a relaxing score. "1986 kicks off with the game you wish you didn't have for Christmas that year. If you were looking forward to getting Highlander for Christmas in 1986, then I truly feel sorry for your parents who had to deal with the aftermath of a broken child that Christmas morning. Highlander is a cult classic with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery. Your score of 1.93% is much like the Warriors in this film, immortal. Your low score will likely remain immortal too. The developers behind this one have had this age-long reviewing war since 1986. Sean Connery was detained for murder in the film. Ocean should have been detained for breaking children's hearts and destroying childhoods. I was recently talking to an ex-staff member of Ocean Software, and Highlander is one of the reasons that 1986 went down as the worst year for games being produced, and hence its expansion of in-house staff that Gary Bracey of Ocean Software hired back in 1987 in order to check on the quality of games before releasing them. Knight Rider had many things going for it: an awesome theme tune, an awesome vehicle, kit, one of the most iconic vehicles right next to the Ghostbusters Ecto-1. My lord, this show was right up there next to the 18. Shows like this is what made the 80s the decade worth remembering and celebrating. Pure gold. We then got this, which many will consider as a game that nightmares are made of. One very angry Lemoner commented, "Shite Rider." Those who commented nice things about this game are still bitter that they were lumbered to a 2.21% game that isn't far off from the score of Highlander. I heard a rumour once that David Hasselhoff was so mad at Ocean that this was the reason that the show ended in 1986. Originally a game for the ZX Spectrum, which released back in 1984, that was fondly remembered by Specky fans. FIFA didn't exist back then, and this was one of the games that kids were playing before that came in. As a football fan herself, my fiancée once told me about walking football. For those who are unaware of walking football, yes, this is a thing. As I was playing match day, I remembered her talking to me about this a while back. It kind of feels like an eternity pushing, not kicking the ball towards the goal, with a sound that sounds like an LCD game. I played this game for around 2 minutes and realised this game was going to be terrible. A warning should have been put onto the box for Matchday C64. Do not operate heavy machinery or drive after playing this game. I'd imagine that 1986 had a surge in A&E patients across Britain at the time. 2.42% is what Lemoners rated this game as. Another film to gain time of a Sylvester Stallone 1986 action film, which largely in 2023 has been forgotten about when compared to Rocky or Rambo. A little like other forgotten gem, which was Over the Top that Sylvester Stallone starred in. I totally recommend Over the Top if you're into father's rights and arm wrestling. So Cobra for C64. What better way than to encourage kids of 1986 to watch an ultra-violent film which was slated at the time by film critics because of its excessive use of gore and violence. It's a sad story with the Cobra on C64. The gameplay is most certainly there, as well as awesome music produced by legendary Sid Chip musician Ben Daglish. The issue I found with Cobra is from an action fast-paced film into a very slow game. Shame with a few adjustments, I think this release could have been half decent. Lemoners scored this as a 4.54%. I hate to admit it, but hands down the ZX Spectrum version of this is miles better. If there was a way of encapsulating the 1980s in a single series, Miami Vice was that show, and the chart-topping song Crockett Swing by Jan Hammer also added to this greatness. Absolute classic stuff that depicted new wave culture of the 80s, and an example of why TV for some time now has lacked in quality entertainment like we once had before reality shows slowly took over pure talent and genius. So Miami Vice was originally released between 1984 and ended in 1990, and premised around two undercover detectives working in Miami, often explosive episodes, and ranked highly as one of the most influential shows ever. Then we move on to this ocean game. Driving the car is almost impossible, where controls feel stiff and crashing happens very often. We then enter buildings if you're lucky enough to enter one, given time restraints in this game. Martin Galway produced the music for this. It's such a shame that such a gifted Sid musician had his work embedded into this game. Lemon 64 voted collectively as 4.86%. A totally different take on the classic Hunchback 1983 game. Hunchback the Adventure is very different. This is a text adventure that for fans of the original 1983 release wouldn't have been too impressed with if not a fan of this genre. This game has no comments on Lemon 64 as recorded in this video, which tells me that this game has no particular fond memories from anybody. If you enjoy wasting a few hours typing mundane commands such as drop serpent, go south, go north, then this title is for you. My commands for Hunchback the Adventure is simply roll back time and create another 1983 classic, The Adventure. The rating for this scores a 5.6%, not bad especially for a game with only music in the title screen. V was a very popular 1980s sci-fi American show, and guess what? Ocean did it again. But to be fair, users' comments of the V computer game are a mixed bag, so not strictly holding the Highlander status, but certainly not a masterpiece such as Lemon 64's current top ranking game, which is Sam's Journey from 2017 by Protovision. So the idea in a nutshell behind the short-lived series, which ran between 1984 and 1985, seeing Earth being invaded by an alien race of reptilians known as visitors, the game itself features, as a Lemmer commented, impossible mission Donovan sprite, which I agree looks very similar in movement. The game could have been great, an alien invasion, a good chance to make a shooter from this, but instead we had an average adventure platformer, which is a very frustrating play and highly irritating too. Dear Lord Ocean, 1986 truly is a bad time for you. Video computer game for C64 scores a 5.6%. At first glance on the loading screen for Super Bowl XX, or Super Bowl XX, this suddenly reminded me of Games Workshop's Blood Bowl. Not sure why though, one of those things. Of course, Super Bowl is an American football game which comprises of managerial and business simulation, as well as some top-down action. Kind of a cut down version of something like Premier Manager on the Commodore Amiga, which released a few years later. Super Bowl XX could be seen as building a framework around the genre. Things are looking up from now on in 1986. Honest to God, those last few games I had to play made me feel miserable, controlled and violated. A little like an ex I was once with. We all know that feeling, right? Anyways, upwards and onwards for 1986 from now on. We are now onto a better game. A game with some cheerful graphics and fun gameplay. Hunchback 2. A game which has had a good score of 6.58%. by the good people over on Lemon 64. This fun little game is a take on the original 1983 game and involves no typing commands. Yes, adventure, you. A fun game for sure. Just watch out for those birds. They will send you to a bad place just like that ex-girlfriend once did. This genre likely inspired later games such as Desert Strike. Collect things using a ladder which drops down from your helicopter to refuel and grab ammo. It's a nicely presented game and can see that some effort has definitely been put into the helicopter jagged game. It oddly reminds me of the classic Choplifter 2. 6.61% is what this side-scrolling shooter earned itself by Lemoners. Oh, and did I mention Martin Galway produced the music for this one too? Well done Ocean, finally, and well done Martin for great game music. N.O.M.A.D is a bizarre but creative top-down sci-fi action shooter that provides a learning curve in adjusting to its clever control scheme. It took me a little while to adapt to the controls, but can see N.O.M.A.D as being a game that I will be going back to eventually. Fred Gray programmed Sid nicely in this one, with a good soundtrack. Lemoners voted this as a big 6.63%. If anybody can tell me what the abbreviation for N.O.M.A.D actually means, drop it in the comments. Ocean are out again. Next up we have Rambo, First Blood Part 2. This one is heavily regarded by C64 fans as a pure classic. I must admit it is a good top-down shooter, and of course it is based on the best Rambo film ever made. This is most certainly an example of Ocean Software taking a film license and turning it into a goods game for kids and adults to enjoy back in the day. 7.5% is no surprise to me at all. I actually gameplayed this one over a year back on my channel and was a little clueless as to what to do. Thankfully a YouTuber told me at the time. Great game and of course superb 80s over the top action film with one of the 80s best loved action stars, Sylvester Stallone. Have you ever heard of Super Mario? No, Me neither. But the character you play as in Donkey Kong is a plumber attempting to rescue a random woman from the evil clutches of a donkey, also known as Donkey Kong. A direct port and a very good one too from Nintendo. Argued in the comments section from Lemon64, is this version better than the countless Atari ports? I will leave that for you to decide. 7.53% is what Lemoners rated this one as. Fair play Ocean for producing another solid conversion game. A couple of weeks back I did a gameplay of The Great Escape and explained how since the year of 1991 it baffled me as to what to do in this game and how to play it. I also commented on its nice looking loading screen presentation but criticised its ZX Spectrum look, which looks far too obvious with little attention given to the C64 version. The Great Escape is of course based on the classic 1963 Prisoner of War film starring Steve McQueen. It's an isometric game and most Lemon 64 users comment and rate it between 4 to 5 stars. As a total, I've given this film game tie-in 7.75%. We have reached the best voted game for 1986 by Ocean Software. This is Parallax. Parallax features a very clever controller scheme, and it took me a little while to get to grips with this. I suddenly see myself flying around wondering where to fly to. This one is ranked at a whopping 7.83% by the users over at Lemon. Without a doubt, Parallax will be one I go back to, and will of course look away from the seizure-inducing title screen next time. Firstly, this game did not take my breath away, neither did it take anybody else's breath away. Judging from what I played on this outrageous 1987 Ocean title, the only thing that it did take away was my sanity. I didn't feel like Tom Cruise playing this, but I felt like a kid in 87 receiving this as a gift and then crying for the rest of the week. Titles released in 1987 was getting advanced, and this game feels like it was programmed for a ZX81 on steroids. You was lucky to have received a 3.72% rating for this, Ocean. Boot Camp has several mini-games included. I chose the sniper option for this video. For its time, this was unique, or so I hadn't come across another game like this one. Kinda reminded me of Silent Scope on the Sega Dreamcast, but obviously a primitive version. Kids who turned into adults had to wait around 20 years for a Call of Duty to come out, or as the cool kids call it, COD. The good people over on Lemon collectively voted Boot Camp as a 4.22%. I think the name of the game explains it all. You play as a tank. It really is that simple. Anyways, Tank could have been a decent shoot 'em up, but instead we got stiff controls with no ability to turn diagonally, and what makes it harder is that you don't have much choice than to get hit when an enemy tank is firing at you. I also found a few dudes chasing after my tank. I wasn't sure if these were allies or not. 5.43% is what Lemoners ranked Tank. I knew of the Mario Brothers game on the C64, and I knew it was very similar to the Atari 2600 version of the same name. Of course, at this point, the world had already been introduced to Super Mario Brothers on the NES 2 years prior to the release of this game. This could have been a very nice port, but I found that controlling Mario was a little difficult. Kind of felt like I was walking on ice as I kept sliding everywhere. It's obviously an upgrade from the 2600 version. I think that 5.5% score on Lemon 64 is a justified vote. So who owned Mad Balls as a kid? I'd totally forgotten about these toys up until researching for this video. Awesome stuff. A fad that quickly came and went, a little like Boglins did. Anyways, this title reminded me a lot of Bounder, only move across halls once the ball is at full height for sure. Personally, I found Bounder easier to control. Mad Balls likely made people mad back in 1987, and that's fair enough. The speed of this and at times confusing gameplay is what likely caused this just over average score of 5.67%. %95% of games in the Ocean catalogue I am familiar with, especially around this era. I must say that Double Take isn't one of them. I booted it up and had no idea what to expect. Generally, Lemon 64 users favoured this game, especially its music, which was programmed by Peter Clark and voted as a 5.67%. It's not perfect, it is fun and a fast-paced shooter, single screen shooter. Apparently, the game features state-of-the-art 3D gameplay, which might come later in the game. Several people never got to play this part of the game by the seams of it due to its difficulty. By far, Short Circuit was one of the 80s best films, right next to the forgotten Cocoon films that have been totally forgotten about. So the game then, I remember seeing this when at Toys R Us as a kid, but never had it. It seems like a mixed bag. Some think it's a wonderful game, some say it's boring, but if I'm honest, judging by the first stage, I thought this too. It's likely one I will revisit to play a bit more of it. Number 5 is certainly alive. 6.02% is what Lemon64 scored this game. Not bad. If you watch my Ocean 1986 video, you will recall me comparing the original Matchday with walk-in football. This one, it's still slow, but seems somebody at Ocean realised that football is based around speed. This was slightly implemented in Matchday 2, and overall a vast improvement visually and in terms of gameplay mechanics. One Lemoner commented, even back in 87, it was slower than a constipated dump. And the footballers all look like Ram Man out of the He-Man cartoons. Nevertheless, you voted 6.1%. Shall we just agree that Ocean could never nail football games? Interesting story for stories. I could find no official box art for this one with the Ocean logo on it. It seems that Ocean didn't want to publish stories as it was too slow. Slow? Ocean? You do remember Matchday, right? Anyways, the loader screen indeed has the Ocean logo, so I am not entirely sure about the history of this one. Nevertheless, yes, it is a slow game and would likely be better played with a super CPU. It is an early vector racing game which is almost unplayable but had a great soundtrack by Fred Gray. 7% is what Lemon64 collectively voted as. Just be prepared for a strange control scheme when playing this one. As you can see from combat school, I could not get my aspiring soldier to run, so I did not see much else of the game. I did enjoy watching the other soldier run though, so in terms of combat, I didn't see any at all. Of course we have a fantastic soundtrack to Combat School by the great Martin Galway. 1987 was a time for Ocean to capitalise on warm-themed games by the seams of this list. Combat School is classed as a multi-sports game and ranked fairly well with an impressive 7.5%. Tai-Pan is an adventure game set in the Far East. It has been suggested that Tai-Pan is a crime simulator at heart, and it's a game that needs some time and patience adjusting to the world you play in. The heart of the game is of the naval genre, but as you can see from the footage, I was too busy getting lost in the streets. This game appears to be Grand Theft Auto Pirate Edition. It also features gambling and prostitution. Many Lemon users found this game challenging as kids, but still, 7.38% is a solid score for a game that likely created the idea for Grand Theft Auto back in 1997. Here is a game that you should hand to a kid in 2023 and just say, have fun. Mutants is a typical strange game, but likely a smart game once figuring out how it works. It is considered as a top-down shooter, but be warned, Mutants is one of those games with bizarre control mechanics, but after around 20 minutes you can adjust to them easily. Fantastic music once again by Fred Gray. It is now at this point where I can see that the Commodore 64 and its legendary SID chip is still being used today. 7.45% is a great score for Mutants, but cannot help but think if this was rated so highly because of the music scored by Gray. Another Ocean filmed game tie-in, this time with Platoon, which released a year prior to Ocean releasing this game. Largely considered as a great game with some fantastic music by Jonathan Dunn, it comprises of several different styles of gameplay, side-scrolling first-person perspective to name a couple. You see, sometimes Ocean did get games right when hiring in the right coders. 8.06% is what Platoon scored. Considered as an all-time classic which has had several reboots over the years, including a recent one on Nintendo Switch, Head Over Heels is considered as an isometric classic from John Rittman, who programmed Batman a couple of years prior to this one. Head Over Heels is a fun game. If you're into isometric action puzzlers, it has a belter of a soundtrack too. 8.27% is clearly a score, which is worthy of the game in every way. Whizball is another 8-bit Commodore game which has gone down in history as a classic. It is a shoot 'em up, but be warned, the controls are tough to get grip of. Once you can master them, you are in some serious great C64 action. It is bizarre and quirky, but what microcomputer games are about really. Whizball also has a sequel named WizKid on the Commodore Amiga, which baffled me in my younger years. Martin Galway once again provided an excellent soundtrack for Whizball. 8.51% is roughly around the score I expected for this one. Fantastic stuff, Ocean. Before the world was introduced to one of the much loved football games in 1992, sensible soccer was what many football fans were waiting for. Ocean at this point had undeniably produced some very bad football games, and Emilio Football was certainly one of them. Spanish language only and based on one of the big names in football of the time, I found this title nothing special and also found gameplay to lag when too much was going on at the same time. Sprites also flickered too, and the music didn't resemble a football spirit at all. One Lemoner simply commented, "Another useless piece of junk." We are off to a great start in 1988. 3.24% is what Lemoner voted this game as. Hyperactive is a defender-style game where the players watches a radar to destroy enemies. Fred Gray produced the music for this one, and it is of average gameplay. Nothing to write home about, but a quick time waster for sure. Visually not bad either, but if you had a choice between this and Defender, I'd go for Defender. If you can find an original copy of this one, you will likely become rich overnight. Players of this game played it on a February 1989 cover tape of Commodore User. Many people on Lemon find this title a mystery as it never got an official Ocean release, but we can see that this one is somehow linked with Ocean, 5.13%. Not to be confused with the Eine software game of the same name, Moonshadow also had a strange going on. There appears to be no official release from Ocean, but as we can see, the loader screen indicates that Ocean had some dealing with this game at some point. Cascade Games also released this game as Zone Trooper, and it could be speculated that Ocean had this copy as some kind of prototype. Anyways, the game itself is an average, if not bizarre, shooter. That kind of reminds me of Agent X in certain ways. 9 votes rated Moonshadow at 5.67%. Right, now we have a couple of oddities out the way, let's begin. Ocean are back with their final instalment of Daley Thompson. I found this one the easiest to navigate and to play. Undoubtedly, Ocean gave things a major workover on Olympic Challenge. I could actually make my athlete run too, but as you can see, failed miserably. I also noticed the blatant Adidas and Lucasade mentions. Sellout? Nevertheless, Daley came silver in this challenge with a 5.76% score. Guts is a game I have seen around over time but never actually played it or had no idea what it was actually about. On loading it up, first thing that put a smile on my face was the music produced by Fred Gray. I have to say, this is the best Fred Gray score yet for me. Gameplay wise, you are trapped inside an alien, hence Guts. It is an arcade shooter that some find repetitive. Maybe so, but damn, that music is so good. Some of the best Sid music I have ever heard. Inner Space released in 1987 and featured being trapped inside a body. Inspired by the film much? The generous folk at Lemon rated Guts 6.42%. Quite likely the biggest game from Ocean in 1988, we have Greiser, also known as Contra, as it was titled in America, whilst Konami published it. A very simple shoot 'em up which features a range of different gameplay elements that many people remember playing fondly. It is considered as one of the finest conversions around. Dare I say it, I was and still not convinced that Greiser or Contra are good games. In fact, I will say that they are overrated. But who am I to say that? Just Jamie, the YouTuber who was doing these videos for you, so there. It's not surprising that Greiser scored a 6.96%, whereas its American counterpart, Contra, scored a lower 6.57%. As we know at this point, Ocean had a reputation of bodging up games from big films of the day. Dear Lord, Highlander and Miami Vice for example. Rambo 3 is a fair game which I personally enjoyed playing in the early 1990s. It's still a decent shooter with incredibly good music by Jonathan Dunn. I like to think that this game is much better than the letdown of the film Rambo 3 was. One Lemoner commented, the C64's answer to Metal Gear. I see a similarity there. I did a gameplay video on this one a while back and finally made it out of the prison. Boom! 7.08% is an excellent score, and I'm sure Sylvester Stallone would be delighted with this score. I'll be honest, Firefly baffled me from the get-go. I will join the rest of the Lemon 64 community who say the game presents itself very well with yet again another brilliant soundtrack from Fred Gray. I honestly had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do with this game, but I am confident that like most complex C64 games that require some brain power, this game could be a great game. It is generally accepted that this is a solid title with a big score of 7.25%. I remember this game as a kid in arcades on holiday. The arcades game came with 2 mounted machine guns, and this one always seemed very busy with people chucking in their 20p coins. Personally, I preferred investing my coins into the Turtles or Shinobi game. Clearly, Operation Wolf was inspired by Rambo. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that this C64 conversion is a good solid one. A 7.49% is an expected score for Operation Wolf. This is one of the first games I played as a kid. Batman, the Caped Crusader is a clever comic book style game. As you enter new rooms or scenes, the previous area displays itself like you have just flipped a page in a comic book. Innovative stuff for 1988 really. The Caped Crusader features games The Penguin and the Joker. I played this game for this video, which was the first time since I was a kid. I have to say it's impressive and it held up well. The music by Fred Gray is clearly outstanding. It is generally commented to be a frustration but a very clever game. 7.57% is what Lemoners rated this game as. We are kicking off 1989 with the worst voted game, which is of course a classic ocean bodge job. Chase HQ. What can I say? I found this arcade port as exhilarating as a weekend of watching back-to-back episodes of The Only Way is Essex. I mean seriously, the arcade game was one of the best, and then we had this. By 1989, we had the American port of Outrun, which wasn't perfect, but at least it felt that you were in a high-speed car compared to this trash. Just imagine being that kid in 1989 whinging about this game. 3.09% is fairly high in score for this shoddy mess. A mediocre Arnold Schwarzenegger action film. I last watched this one as a kid and have to say it clearly made no lasting impact on my favourite Arnie films as a child. So we have here a stinker of a game in which you can see by my gameplay, this is actually it. Move forwards and punch and headbutt enemies, dull and very repetitive gameplay, which is made very difficult by enemies throwing things at which point it is too late to duck. The only thing Red Heat has going for is his visual style. 3.74% is what Red Heat scored over on Lemon 64. Beach volleyball is as it says by the title, literally beach volleyball. From the start you will notice that this title should have upbeat and fun summer music to complement its summer theme. We don't have that here. We have a depressing soundtrack, which makes me wonder if Colin Gordon, who produced the music, was going through a grievance at the time. It's not actually the worst ocean sports games out there, and it actually looks pretty good too. The gameplay just lacks something. 5.27% is a fair score which the Lemoners voted beach volleyball as. What can I say about Renegade 3? To be honest, I am surprised it scored as highly as it did in this list. It is a notoriously bad game which is as buggy as a rough sleeper's mattress. We have double dragon situation where player moves and enemy sprites move with him. A totally bizarre mashup of random enemy sprites which seem to be out of place for Renegade. Collision detection is poor at best. Sprite design and level design is fine, if not perfect. Putting these random bits together isn't great at all. It's a mess, and I wonder if the developers of Renegade 3 just gave up in the end. Don't let the inlay artwork fool you. This game was as bad as a kid too. A score of 5.69% seems generous for Renegade 3. Okay, so now we have the bad out of the way, we now start with the good. I am going to be frank with RoboCop. This is one of my childhood favourites as well as one of my childhood favourite franchises. Jonathan Dunn wrote an excellent, if not perfect, soundtrack to RoboCop. I would get highly frustrated with this game as a kid. Finishing the narcotics production factory was impossible, which is a fact. Ocean developers made this impossible. It turns out that the levels after this was a garbled mess, which were unplayable, so I am guessing time restrictions of coding RoboCop led developers to block access purposely to avoid the rest of the game. Thankfully, a coder a few years back fixed this game, and you can play it in its entirety now. The good voters at Lemon64 voted this as a 6.34%. If it wasn't for the mess which was publicly released back in 1989, I am sure this would have scored much higher. Another film to game conversion, this time with Kevin Costner and Sean Connery's Untouchables film. This was actually the first time I played in this game, and it wasn't actually that bad. The premise is set during the Al Capone times and the banning of alcohol in America during the early 1930s, known as the Prohibition. The game itself has some extremely nice looking artwork and animation throughout. The game has several different sections rather than just being restricted to a linear platforming experience. There are top-down, first-person view sections of the game, but as you can see from my gameplay, I didn't get too far. This game is leap years ahead of the trashy Miami Vice conversion back from 1986. See? Ocean coders did do things right sometimes. If you were a James Bond fan in the 1980s, decent James Bond games were rare to come by. Sly Spy is clearly a game based on 007 from the opening of the game, which is a parachute stage, which is clearly the same beginning that Timothy Dalton's License to Kill had, which coincidentally released the same year as this game. Sly Spy for the C64 is a port of the classic arcade game of the same name. This port is a superb one, although playing this on multi-load cassette as a child drove me beyond despair, waiting for levels to load. It's a great game, and the only thing that lets it down was loading times. 7.43% is a great score. I have come across Run the Gauntlet over the years, but I have never investigated it. Gauntlet is a multi-sports game based on a TV show with a fantastic SID soundtrack produced by Jonathan Dunn. On first impressions and the first event I chose to play, I felt like I was playing Micro Machines, only an earlier version of it prior to the Mega Drive release. It's a fun game, but as we can see, I failed significantly in getting anywhere with it. 7.69% is what Lemoners voted this as. We have up next a game that I played as a kid. This is Batman the movie, which released the same year as Tim Burton's film starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. It is a great game which has two styles of gameplay incorporated, platformer and then side-scrolling vertical levels to reach later levels in this game. Superb soundtrack created by Matthew Cannon and certainly memorable too. Let me tell you, if you haven't played Batman the movie, be warned, the vertical stages are very, very frustrating. 7.72% is what the Lemon community voted. The Newzealand Story is a very famous Saito arcade game that released back in 1988. By 1989, the microcomputer conversions started appearing. This is a fantastic conversion of a cult classic arcade game. Most people will agree that this is by no means an easy game, and by the looks of it, most kids at the time would use poke codes to cheat to actually finish this game. Others said that in retrospective, the C64 port had poor collision detection. 7.82% is what Lemon 64 voters gave the Newzealand Story. There are two C64 versions of Cable. Thankfully, Ocean's European version scored much better than its American counterpart, which was published by Capcom. Cable released in 1988, and again, just like the Newzealand Story, we had a port months later. And this is the best ranked game from Ocean of 1989, scoring 7.86%. It's possibly the best crosshair shoot 'em up, or at least one of them, on the Commodore 64. As you can see from my gameplay, I had an awesome time taking down the enemies whilst eventually learning that spacebar launched my grenades, which caused much more damage than my standard machine gun did. I cannot help but think of Rambo 3 playing this game. Very cool stuff indeed. Quite possibly the longest length of time I've ever had to wait to load a game. When people refer to the loading times of old games, this is the type of thing they are talking about. A loading section for a title screen, loading section for something else, and so on, just to arrive at the game itself, which appears to be pretty shoddy. I even had a turbo boost to load this game, and it still took about an hour. Ocean Software, even by 1990, could not grasp that people coding football games for them to publish were bad. 1990 seen the 14th FIFA World Cup that year. Football fans had no idea that the definitive football video games franchise, FIFA, was just around 3 years away. Until then, they had to wait and play tripe like this. 3.3% is what Lemon collectively voted for. One bitter Lemoner commented, "Pure crap." although most agreed that presentation was great but poor gameplay. I would like to say that the advertisements for this game back in the day justified what a great game this was going to be, but simply, it wasn't. It is a dull and pitiful waste of time, waste of life, and simply a waste of power for your Commodore 64. I kind of pretended to like Shadow Warriors as a kid. It was, and still is, a sluggish mess, which illustrates how advertisements back in the day would strongly promote shoddy games using different screenshots of different systems of the same game. What else can I say? This is likely as great as Masteronic's Double Dragon. 4.12% is far too kind for Shadow Warriors. I actually dreaded loading this one up again after all these years have passed. After playing Operation Thunderbolt, I was left thinking, this is almost like somebody began coding the game and then gave up soon after. As you can see from Stage 1, I was shooting at the helicopters, to which they did not blow up. Stage 2 they did. I think the biggest issue that Thunderbolt has was the crosshair disappearing when not firing. Sprite design isn't actually that bad, and pretty bog standard for this era of Commodore 64 games. Of course, it nowhere near matches the 1988 Taito arcade game that this game was converted from. Originally, this was played using a light gun, and the C64 light gun games from experience didn't go too well. It's not bad, but it's not terrific either. 5.3% is a fair score for Operation Thunderbolt. Nightbreed is a 1990 Clive Barker film with the famous Danny Elfman in charge of the soundtrack. Largely forgotten about and lost to history, Ocean once again took it on their stride to get a license to base a game on. I once borrowed this game from a friend back in the day. To remember, it was like taking a very long time to load this one. Nightbreed has different sections to it rather than being a linear game with regards to platforming. Many voters on Lemon commented to explain the greatness of Nightbreed, but many also say as kids they weren't allowed it, as this was the era before age ratings started taking place on games. 5.85% seems like a fair score for me for Nightbreed. I played this later on in life, well after the 90s had passed. I vaguely remember this one being advertised in Commodore format and it looked fine. I will repeat here, looked fine. That is until you play it. I have compared this before and said it should have been called Robocop on ice. Robocop moves and feels like you are sliding everywhere and it is very hard to judge when jumping. It is also animated in a cartoon style, almost reminiscent to the Hook game. We find that during the 80s and even 90s, different developers would take over to produce sequels, and you end up with something incoherent like this game, which doesn't feel or look like the original. If the controls were tighter, it could have been a great game. 6.11% is what Lemoners rated this as. The film wasn't bad either, regardless of a child running a criminal syndicate. Narc was heavily advertised in Commodore format, and I remember it really well with the Ocean advertisements. So what is Narc? It was the first video game to feature outrage from concerned parents about its ultra-violent theme. Just a couple of years later, Doom would have received the same criticism. The goal was to kill and arrest drug dealers and ultimately kill Mr. Big in the final stage. It was of course a 1988 arcade game, and the C64 conversion isn't that bad. Kinda reminds me of Smash TV when collecting things that enemies drop behind them. It's got a very cool soundtrack produced by Paul Tunn. Not a bad game and worth a little play if you had 10 minutes to spare. It undoubtedly gets repetitive though. I first tried the C64 port of Shadow of Beast a good few years back when I was collecting the C64 GS cartridge collection from Ocean. I actually enjoyed this port. Of course, it is nowhere near as the perfection of the original 1989 Amiga version, which was held for its visuals and perfect parallax scrolling in its day. But for the C64 and its hardware limitations, this isn't actually a bad port. This was a very good attempt for the 8-bit machine considering the inferior hardware compared to the Amiga. This is a great port and equally a very nice rendition of the music used in the SID chip by Frederick Segerfolk. A tough game for sure, but after all, 8-bit games were known for this. 7.19% is what the good people over at Lemon voted this as. Remember my last video of 1989's Chase HQ? The game that nightmares were made of. This isn't the case for Chase HQ 2 though. This one is actually considered as one of the C64's better racing titles. Chase HQ 2 was also coded by a different person too, and hence quite possibly why Lemon 64 the users collectively voted this one at 7.25%. It's another cartridge only release originally that was put in place to promote the new Commodore C64 GS at the time, which ended up being a complete flop of course. So Chase HQ 2, more of the same thing as the first game, only this one feels like a high octane chasing game. Many Lemners, including myself, consider this conversion to be a top grade game which looks to part 2. To be honest, I have never heard of this one before, but plotting is a very fun and hidden gem for puzzler gamer fans. Of course, it is a similar style to Tetris, but different. Tetris, of course, broke the mold for games like this, and of course coders would try to capitalise on its success too. Nevertheless, plotting surprised me how good this title is with a very awesome soundtrack by Sonic Graffiti. A very nice layout too, with colourful gameplay and a cutesy character controlling the tiles that you throw. 7.38% is a good score for this hidden classic. Next up we have another puzzler. Ocean were clearly busy in 1990 attempting to capture a new audience for their C64 games. Puzznik is a simple concept. Use the square highlighter to move the pattern blocks to another block of the same pattern. Of course it starts off fairly simple but gets more complex really quickly. A great soundtrack too by Jeff Folin. A simple but effective game that gets the job done through its simplicity. This was originally released by Taito as an arcade game back in 1989. 1990 seen a multitude of microcomputers getting its own conversion, and this conversion is very good if you don't mind wrapping your brain around puzzlers. 7.73% is what Puzznik received as a score over on Lemon. When people recall older games being hard, Navy Seals definitely identifies as one of those games. You seriously will not get much tougher than this game. It is a highly polished game which today would likely be classed as a AAA title. It was released as a cartridge only game. Yes, 1990 had many of these being produced by Ocean. It's a very nice game to play if you enjoy platform shooters, but 100% this game is as hard as they come for most people who agree with this too. The issue with Navy Seals is that what makes this game so damn hard is the fact that you cannot shoot upwards or even diagonally. You also get no health, so one hit and you are simply dead. 8.25% is what Lemoners voted. Originally released as an arcade game back in 1988, Rainbow Islands was and still is a classic platformer released by Taito. Yes, Ocean had a good year in 1990, grabbing many of these popular arcade Taito games. This conversion is exceptional too, and of course most microcomputers and consoles at the time each had their own conversion of Rainbow Islands. It's a colourful and cheerful game which voters over at Lemon rank at 8.34%, and technically was a sequel to the famous Bubble Bobble, although nothing like Bubble Bobble in terms of gameplay. The premise of Rainbow Islands is simple: shoot rainbows to reach the top of the scoring screen to grab the treasure chest, trap enemies under your rainbows and earn points. Rainbow Islands is highly regarded as a retro gaming classic. And the top voted Ocean game of 1990 goes to the rather impressive Midnight Resistance, which again, like many Ocean games in 1990, was converted from a Data East arcade game. And this game truly delivers a shoot 'em up, 2D scrolling platform experience. The thing you will notice with Midnight Resistance is endless possibilities in which you can shoot at enemies, jump and shoot diagonally, lie down and shoot diagonally, collect items that give you power-ups at the end of stages. This feels like a complete game where nothing had been missed from the arcade classic. Midnight Resistance is a highly addictive and fun game, and every C64 player needs to play this one. 8.39% is what Midnight Resistance scored. It was generally pretty good on every platform. It's also noted that the C64 version ranks amongst the best of all ports of Midnight Resistance. We start off 1991 with the worst of Ocean. First up, we have a slightly better port of Double Dragon than that of the original attempt by Melbourne House in 1989, which barely qualifies as a game at all. This port by Ocean has improvements such as music for a start, which complements the arcade game. The graphics and presentation are also good. As you can see, enemy sprites look lazy. Hit collision detection is quite poor, where I found that head button only seems to work as a quicker way of hitting down enemies. Jumping requires a press of the spacebar, which simultaneously needs you to hit action button to go into a flying kick. It's better than the 1989 version, but still lacks in several things. Many people are unaware of the existence of this cartridge. 4.89% for Ocean's attempt at Double Dragon. Even if you didn't like WWF, you likely would have known several wrestlers being mentioned at school. Ultimate Warrior, Sergeant Slaughter, Bret Hitman Hart, and of course Hulk Hogan. WWF was huge, that's before it underwent a name change to WWE, and of course Hulk Hogan went a step too far and thought he could act in big Hollywood films, which flopped. Anyway, so for WrestleMania, we have a big franchise emerging and Ocean joins in with the action. Now admittedly, I was never a big wrestling fan and so this game was totally alien to me, but I was actually fairly surprised at how well the game responds to controls. Hit detection is pretty good too. As you can see, my opponent was totally wiping the floor with me here, but generally the presentation looks very polished. I would imagine that 1991 seen a rise in joystick sales with the sale of this game. Nevertheless, WWF WrestleMania scored a 5.65% over on Lemon. When superhero films didn't appear in cinemas 10 times per year, we had a couple of forgottens that actually did well at the box office at this time. This is Darkman, which was by Sam Raimi, the brains beyond the Evil Dead franchise, which stars Liam Neeson. Admittedly, I think I saw this film once many moons back as a video shop rental. Anyways, long story short, the premise is Baddies disconfigures Mr. Darkman's face and Mr. Darkman seeks revenge after adopting superhuman abilities. This is the gist of Darkman. Gameplay wise, yes, Ocean grabbed another film license to make a game out of it. It's not too bad, but also forgettable too. A standard punch 'em up affair with some great Sid Chip music by Jonathan Dunn once again. 5.71% is a collective vote for this game. Now, before we had the abomination of a reboot back in 2012, or whatever the hell that was about, we had the classic Paul Verhoeven sci-fi action blockbuster starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. A cult classic and a fairly big hit back in 1990 on its release. Yes, Ocean once again takes on a big name and converts it to the C64. Firstly, a great soundtrack by Jonathan Dunn and awesome presentation for the game's opening. Gameplay wise, this wasn't actually too bad. The only gripe I had with Total Recall was the controlling for jumping. For example, you will bounce back if you miss your destination and hit something else in between. Interestingly though, games that weren't 64 released the demo of how this game was originally going to look, which is different from the version we got. All in all, not a bad game, which eventually leads into driving levels. 5.76%. So The Simpsons first aired on Fox in 1990, and by the time of this release, The Simpsons was huge. I had this one on cassette tape for my birthday back in 91, and personally thought it was an okay game. I much preferred the NES port of this one, which had music during gameplay, but that's likely a touch of nostalgia. People generally don't think much of Bart vs. the Space Mutants, and dare I say it, the only Simpsons game to reach a legendary status was the arcades game, which also released in 1991 with a C64 port soon to follow. Anyways, Bart vs. the Space Mutants for C64 is what it is, comprising of several different platforming stages with objectives to meet. The first stage is a case of spray painting objects and eventually ending the stage by taking down Nelson Muntz with the help of Maggie. 5.81% seems fair to me. One of 1991's biggest selling films, and within the same year, Ocean delivers a film-to-game tie-in. If you had a C64 GS to play this game back then and realised you could not play it due to the lack of keyboards, then this is what you was missing. Not much to write home about, a fairly average fight with fairly good sprite collision when hitting T-1000. Once you defeat him in the arcade, we then go on to the famous motorbike sequence to rescue John Connor, who was escaping from T-1000. Motorbike stage is ridiculously difficult, and one step wrong will see you terminated and having you start from start again. This game was plastered all over Commodore magazines at the time and always wanted it but never did have it. I wasn't missing much really. Presentation and sound wise it's fine, it just seems like a pointless and uninspired game of a classic film. 5.97% is the score, but likely because the cartridge came with a cool music maker too. If you're a certain age, you will remember the amazing TAD Corporation 1989 arcade release of Toki. I played this one a hell of a lot in the arcades back in the early 90s. It had a cartridge only port, which actually isn't that bad. It plays similar to the arcade classic, but did find blocky graphics which are kind of excusable for a not bad port. Toki is challenging, and in recent years it's seen a reboot which needs to be checked out if you didn't know about it. The music is pretty good on this port too. Problem is that around 1991 for sure, kids of that generation had largely gone onto other platforms. And I am pretty sure that this port would have been a little better known if it was released around 1989 on the arcade's release. 7.14% isn't a bad score for this port of Toki. We have another arcade conversion. This is Pan, also known as Buster Brothers in North America, and originally released in Japan by the name of Pumping World in 1989. This isn't one I recall in arcades, but over the years I have played it on several different platforms. The C64 port is pretty faithful to the arcades game though. It does suffer lag from time to time, especially when there is a lot happening on the screen at the same time. It has been voted at 7.58% over on Lemon 64. If you fancy a physical copy of Pang on cartridge, expect to find it in the regions of £150 on eBay. A very impressive arcade port which suffers no lag considering how much is happening on the screen at once. This was the first time I played the C64 port of Smash TV. I sat and played this for around 30 minutes and totally enjoyed the game as much as the arcade original by Williams Electronics back in 1990. The only setback for the port is the lack of 2-player support. If you haven't played this port, seriously, it's worth a download just for the impressiveness of how well everything runs and plays together. 7.78% is a great score for a fictional TV show likely based around the Arnold Schwarzenegger film The Running Man. As you can see from my footage, Battle Command is a good attempt at 3D rendering considering the 64 hardware limitations. I will be honest, I own this one on cartridge and could not figure out how to control this simulation game, but I am guessing that the speed of this one would have let it down. I'd likely suggest using Super CPU on this one if you're going to try it out. Remember though, at this point, the CPU and power regions were still running at under 1 MHz, which is incredibly slow even for 1991. The 64 CPU at that point was almost 10 years old. Nevertheless, it's an impressive game given hardware restrictions. 7.98% for Battle Command. As admitting to The Simpsons being a better port on the NES, this works the polar opposite for Hudson Hawk. I have played most versions of this one, and by far it is the best on the C64. Of course, it is another famous Ocean film license game, but this one ranks highly amongst Lemon's 64 users at 8.7%. The game starts off, in my opinion, a little bland, but comes stage 2, things picks up, and this one can be frustrating at times. I also think somebody at Ocean was attempting a Super Mario coin thing with unusable coins that you can optionally collect throughout the game. I had this one originally on the Hit Squad label and has been a favourite since. Great game for a fairly forgotten, great Bruce Willis gem of a film. "1992, the final year of Ocean's production of Commodore 64 games, starts with WWF European Rampage, and I will say it firsthand, this game seriously sucks in many ways. In 1991, Ocean published WrestleMania, which, for myself admitting I was never a fan of wrestling, wasn't actually a bad game. WWF European Rampage Tour is hard to control for starters and just a dull game with nothing going for it. It is this type of reason that Hulk Hogan always seemed in a foul mood, and I'm not surprised much either. The only thing better is the visuals in this. Gameplay wise, nope, terrible. 4.13% from our good voters over at Lemon64. "1991 saw the release of the 1960s adaptation of the Addams Family. The same year, Ocean went out of their way to bring us this. The better conversions of the Addams Family by far are on the 16-bit platforms such as the Amiga or the Super Nintendo. For microcomputers, we had this trash. Visually, it's not bad. Playability is frustrating and literally one of those Dizzy-like games where it would be best to map out the game with each screen you walk into. This came with a Commodore format cover tape back in the day, and I wasn't impressed much then either. Regardless of my opinion, Lemoners rate this one as a 6.06% game. I think by now many of my subscribers know that I am a RoboCop fanboy. Then came along RoboCop 3, which was a trashy film to begin with, not to mention its totally dumbed down storyline and lack of clever storyline. The game itself for the C64 was released only as a cartridge and features some very impressive visuals and most definitely some of the best Sid chip music from that era, which was programmed by Jerome Tell. The game is half first-person shooter and half platformer. This game is a tough one. I tried getting onto the second stage to highlight how difficult RoboCop is to control in those platform levels, but failed. 6.17% for RoboCop 3. I will say though that I would prefer to play this than watch the god-awful film. So Lethal Weapon 3 hit the cinemas in 1992, and although I'm not particularly a fan, we had a much more family-friendly actor back then prior to a controversial film that he later made in the early 2000s. If there was a game that needed a cartridge release instead of a floppy disk, this would be that game. Literally, I entered a room and the disc took around a minute on turbo speed to load it up. The game itself is pretty good, nice visuals and sprites and a good pace of fluid gameplay too. Although the game isn't going for realism but a cartoon look, which I think it goes well. A standard 2D platforming shooter which is worth checking out. 6.27% is what Riggs and Mortar was voted as. Oh look, we have another film game tie-in here. This is an early Brad Pitt film which bombed miserably when it released. It's almost like somebody wanted to catch on to Roger Rabbit's 1988 film with the style of Cool World being live action mixed with cartoon. To be honest, I have never seen Cool World, but remember this game being advertised very well in magazines back in the day. I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing, but it seemed cool. See what I did there? Anyways, Lemon64 users voted this as a 6.56%. I mean really, this licensing situation by 1992 has gotten well out of hand by now. Yes, another film to game tie-in, this time with Hook, which released in cinemas the previous year and starred the much missed Robin Williams. The film sold immensely well on release, and to some, this ocean game wasn't too bad either. Nice music produced by Jonathan Dunn, and very nice use of colours and graphics overall. Almost looks like a NES game. As for the gameplay, it is a side-scrolling platformer in which seems fairly reasonable if you're into fairy tales. I do know somebody who's into fairy tales, but generally that person talks out of her arse. 6.96% isn't a bad score at all for Hook. Do you remember those arcade games with mounted machine guns attached to the front? If you do, you will likely remember Space Gun very well, which releases the arcade game by Taito back in 1990. This game is pretty rare to come by an original copy, one currently on eBay which is under the Hit Squad label on cassette tape for £250. But hey, the seller is offering you a brand new cassette case to go with it. This conversion isn't too bad, but as you can see from the gameplay, aliens are very blocky and only features a one-player option. The arcade game was fairly fast-paced too, but we can forgive Commodore 64 for these issues, right? 6.29% is what Lemoners voted Space Gun as. And finally, the game that ranks best from 1992 is Sleepwalker. This was produced for Comic Relief in 1993 and quite likely would have sold a very few copies of this at the time. I have never come across this one on physical media during my collecting years, so I would imagine if you had a copy of this, it would be worth a hell of a lot. Gameplay wise, kinda reminds me of Lemons, but only controlling a dog to keep our sleepwalking friend safe as he walks through dangerous areas through the game. It's a good concept but seems to feel a little flat in some way or another. Anyways, the Lemoners vote this last release by Ocean 7.71%. You could say that Ocean kind of went out on a better note than they came in with.